the invasion of Russia has further worsened a precarious situation for the global oil market, particularly in Europe. Oil and gas companies must thus work with national governments to mitigate the effects of a potential disruption in Russian oil and gas exports. Immediate action is required. Additionally, the industry has to strengthen its long-term relevance and resilience in the continuously changing energy market. A new global energy order that China and Russia are about to establish will transform everything. And that's what we'll be discussing today. Exposure of a sector's vulnerability, the oil and gas industry was already in trouble before to the conflict. An invasion or no invasion, the demand for energy was already starting to exceed the supply. Now, it was anticipated that once the market recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, the gap between supply and demand would increase to 2 in 2022. The current global supply shortfall is unprecedented, and regrettably, there is no simple fix. There are many aspects at play, so it is understandable that there aren't any immediate solutions to the issue at hand. Included in it is the time required to increase the effectiveness of renewable energy sources. And some examples of these energy sources include nuclear power, natural gas, and renewable resources. Additionally, since OPEC's oil reserves are already low, liquefied natural gas is also included. Additionally, some energy demands may be satisfied by coal, but doing so would jeopardize the global and industrial commitment to decarbonization. A reliance on oil and gas too much the transportation sector now has an excessive reliance on liquid fossil fuel. Authorities also estimate that 94% of the energy requirements of the sector are met by this sort of fuel. Heavy industries, residential and commercial buildings, and electric power providers are other significant end users with high demand for liquid fuel. According to current predictions, developing markets will make up the majority of the increase in global oil demand. Furthermore, despite their fast-growing populations and transportation industries, these nations are investing less in renewable energy sources, which makes them more dependent on oil. Daily oil consumption has often exceeded supply by approximately 1 million barrels in the years following 2021. The surplus reached its peak in the fourth quarter of 21, and at that time, there were 2 million barrels per day of demand. It was anticipated that non-OPEC producers will close the deficit by the second quarter of 22. Energy dependence on Russia ranks third in all categories and produces and sells more crude, oil, and natural gas than any other nation combined. Russian oil and gas production makes up around 16% of global production. The European continent is currently where Russia's control is most clearly seen. It supplies 30% of the gas and approximately 20% of the oil on the continent. In addition, Austria, Finland, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary all import all of their domestic oil and gas needs from Russia. The petrodollar's decline, President Joe Biden traveled to the country in July to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The kingdom will increase oil output, according to Biden, by adopting further initiatives in the coming weeks, he said after the meeting. A month later, the Saudis made a U-turn and left. In reaction to the recent dip in oil prices, they indicated that they were ready to restrict output. Furthermore, this decline is due to low futures market liquidity and macroeconomic uncertainties. Additionally, in October, OPEC surprised the markets by announcing a 2 million barrel cut in output starting in October. Many believe that this major conflict between the United States and OPEC heralds the end of the petrodollar system. It represents a major break from the existing quo and will have a significant impact on both the political system and the world economy. Why is the petrodollar system? Exactly. The petrodollar system, exactly. The petrodollar is an illegal currency to start with. They are only monies that were acquired from the sale of crude oil to third parties. You see, the phrase gained popularity in the middle of the 1970s, a time when the United States depended more and more on foreign shipments of crude oil. And it was in August 1971 when then President Nixon decided to end the dollar's convertibility to gold, making his action historically significant. The dollar's dominance in the globe now started to decline gradually. The United States then looked for alternative strategies to increase dollar demand. In 1979, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia formed a joint committee on economic cooperation. Additionally, the oil for dollars Agreement stipulates that only US dollars must be used for any purchases of Saudi Arabian oil from the rest of the globe. Additionally, it is advised that the nation invest its excess dollars in US corporate bonds and US government securities. Why is the petrodollar's supreme power declining? The US dollar, however, has been the main reserve currency since the 1970s. However, a number of geopolitical and economic issues might endanger this supremacy. Since quite some time, there has been a move away from the dollar. Venezuela also attempted to change the status quo when sanctions were placed on it by the United States in the 1990s. They accomplished this by paying for oil in Chinese yuan rather than US dollars. The increasing speed of globalization makes the dollar susceptible. This is due to the fact that many countries with bilateral economic relations prefer to conduct business using their own currency. But any animosity toward the US currency that persisted was destroyed by the great financial crisis of 2008. During this time, investors sought to the safety of the most extensively used currency in the world. However, China's rise to prominence as a global power and Russia's exclusion from the SWIFT system may both expedite the shift away from the dollar. The fundamental conflict between the United States and Saudi Arabia is another element. The Saudi monarchy is now one of America's most dependable allies in the Middle East, thanks to the Oil for Money agreement. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia has been the main supplier of crude oil to the American economy. Politically, the U.S. has exploited the kingdom as a pawn in the Middle East to take on Iran, which is the main foe of the region. This link, however, became less strong with time. As strategic reserves have grown, the United States' reliance on foreign oil sources has gradually decreased. The United States bought up to 2 million barrels of Saudi crude oil per day in the 1990s. However, this fell to barely 500,000 barrels per day by 2021. The petro strengthening yuan's recently suspicion that the petro, one may someday replace the petrodollar has been strengthened by recent events. In contrast to its substitute, the petro yuan has a few disadvantages. Additionally, China's financial markets have quickly grown during the past few decades. However, they continue to be far less liquid than us stock markets. Additionally, trading in European markets is greatly facilitated by the enormous eurodollar market. The People's Bank of China would be able to manipulate all yuan transactions since they would all have to take place inside of China. The author of Anbound Chan Kung believes that over the coming years, the dollar will continue to gain ground as the world's fallback currency. And he believes that the current geopolitical and economic environment only strengthens the dollar's status as a safe haven. The Bloomberg Dollar Index is currently at a 20-year high, reflecting the current market situation the traders are witnessing. What will happen next for the BRICS nations, and how will it affect the global economy? Over the past 2 decades, there has been a notable shift in the balance of economic power, and the main reason for this has been the rise of China, and to a lesser extent, the other BRICS countries, including Russia. This group has a tendency toward formalization and institutionalization. They create groups to collaborate and have regular conferences. There are now worries that as it gains power, authoritarian state capitalism will become more commonplace. This worries Westerners as each of the BRICS countries has become more authoritarian and nationalistic over the past 10 years. The emergence of the BRICS countries is thus upending the current global order and encouraging the West to adopt illiberal norms. And while this order is being strengthened and reshaped, there is also pressure on the East to liberalize. What do you think of the new energy order that China and Russia are establishing that will alter the world?